Hello, history friends. Imagine a world where two empires collide in a battle for control of Southeast Asia. The year is 1578, and the Spanish Empire, in full expansion, faces the Sultanate of Brunei, a key maritime power in the spice trade routes. But this is not just a conflict of arms, it is a war of cultures, religions, and political ambitions. What led these giants to confront each other? What secrets does this war that defined the fate of an entire region hide? In this episode of Voices of History, we unravel the riveting tale of the War of Castile, an epic clash that would forever change the map of Southeast Asia. From political intrigues to legendary battles, join us as we discover how Spain and Brunei clashed in a struggle for supremacy. Do you want to know how it all ended? Stay until the end to understand the impact of this conflict on today's world.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be uncovering a conflict that you might not be too familiar with. The Castilian War.
Okay.
It happened in 1578 between Spain and Brunei, and let me tell you, it's a pretty wild ride.
Yeah.
We're talking about spice trade, drama, religious clashes, and a whole lot of political scheming.
Sounds exciting.
Video summary.
All right.
So get ready to travel back in time to the 16th century when the world map was being completely redrawn by exploration and empires were battling it out for control of those super valuable sea roads to the east.
Yeah, this period is so fascinating because you have European powers like Spain and Portugal who were absolutely obsessed with this idea of gold, glory, and gospel. They were driven to expand their empires, fueled by the promise of riches from the spice trade and this burning desire to spread Christianity.
Okay, so spices, I get it. Everybody loves good food, but what made them so valuable that empires were willing to go to war over them?
Well, remember that just a century before, in 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
And that was a major blow to the spice trade because it shut down the traditional land routes that connected Europe to the spice-rich East.
Oh, I see.
So these new sea routes became incredibly valuable. Whoever controlled them controlled the flow of these precious commodities, and that meant serious power and wealth.
It's like a high-stakes game of risk, but with real-world consequences.
Exactly.
And right in the middle of this power struggle, you have Brunei, this powerful Islamic sultanate with a vast maritime empire stretching across Southeast Asia. They even had control over parts of the Philippines.
Yeah.
It sounds like they weren't just going to step aside and let these Europeans just waltz in.
Exactly. Brunei had a thriving trading network and was a major player in the region. They weren't just going to roll over for these newcomers.
Right.
And this is where the tension really starts to build. You've got these ambitious Europeans, hungry for spices and eager to spread Christianity. And then you've got Brunei, this force to be reckoned with controlling key trade routes.
So how did Spain even get a foothold in the Philippines? Weren't they already pretty busy conquering the Americas?
Well, the Philippines were strategically important for a few reasons.
Okay.
First, they offered a potential gateway to China and the rest of East Asia. Plus, they were full of resources that the Spanish wanted. In 1565, they established a base in Cebu with the goal of converting the local population to Christianity and, of course, taking control of those all-important trading ports.
But the Philippines weren't just like a blank slate, right? I mean, they already had their own complex political landscape with different groups and allegiances.
That's right, and this is where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
The Visayan people who had been fighting against Brunei's allies actually ended up siding with the Spanish against Brunei.
Wow.
Can you imagine the political maneuvering going on behind the scenes? Talk about shifting alliances.
It's like a real-life Game of Thrones.
Ugh.
So even before the Castilian War, we've already got this melting pot of competing interests, religious differences, and political intrigue. I'm guessing the arrival of the Spanish with their own agenda just throws gasoline on the fire.
Absolutely. You have to consider the backdrop of Spain's history. They had just emerged from the Reconquista, a centuries-long struggle to expel Muslim rule from the Iberian Peninsula.
Right.
Their perception of Islam was deeply shaped by this experience.
Yeah.
They saw it as a rival faith, a threat to their own religious and cultural identity. So when they encountered this powerful Islamic sultanate in Brunei, it wasn't just a political rivalry, it was also a clash of worldviews.
So it's like they're bringing the baggage of their own history into this new arena.
Exactly.
Given their experience with the Reconquista, how do you think they viewed the spread of Islam in the Philippines? Was it just religious competition or something more threatening?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of Spain's motivations. I think they saw the spread of Islam in the Philippines as a direct challenge to their own imperial ambitions.
Wow.
They were determined to establish their dominance, not just politically and economically, but also religiously.
So it's not just about spices and trade routes, it's about the souls of people.
Right.
And that brings us to Governor General Francisco de Sande. What role did he play in all of this?
De Sande was the Spanish Governor General of the Philippines at the time, and let's just say he wasn't exactly known for his diplomatic skills.
Okay.
He saw Brunei as a major obstacle to Spain's ambitions, both religiously and politically.
So he decided to take a more proactive approach.
You could say that in 1578, he sent a letter to Sultan Saiful Rial of Brunei, and this letter was basically a declaration of war disguised as a diplomatic overture.
I'm all ears. What did this letter say that was so provocative?
Well, in it, de Sande demanded that the Sultan immediately cease all Islamic proselytizing in the Philippines.
Wow.
He even demanded that Christian missionaries be allowed to enter Brunei and preach freely. It was a blatant attempt to assert Spanish authority and undermine Brunei's influence. In his letter, de Sande writes, "The Moors of Borneo preached the doctrine of Mahoma converting all the Moors of the islands." It's a pretty inflammatory statement, and it reveals just how deep the religious animosity ran.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire. That doesn't sound like someone who's interested in peaceful coexistence. What was the Sultan's reaction to this?
The Sultan, as you might imagine, was not impressed.
Right.
He saw the Philippines as part of the Islamic world, Dar al-Islam, and he had absolutely no intention of bowing to Spain's demands.
Right.
He viewed de Sande's letter as a direct insult and a threat to his sovereignty. This clash of ideologies, this fundamental disagreement over religion and territory, was the spark that ignited the Castilian War.
Okay, so we've got the stage set for a major showdown.
Yeah.
On one side, you've got Spain flush with the fervor of the Reconquista, determined to spread their faith and expand their empire.
Yeah.
On the other side, you've got Brunei, a powerful sultanate with a long history of maritime dominance, not about to back down from a fight. It sounds like an epic clash of civilizations is brewing. But before we dive into the actual fighting, there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore, right?
Yes, you're right. We need to talk about those two disgruntled Bruneian nobles, Pengiran Seri Leila and Pengiran Seri Ratna.
Right.
They played a key role in shaping the conflict and ultimately tipped the scales in Spain's favor.
Ah, yes. The Bruneian nobles with their own agenda. This is where things get really juicy, right? It's not just a clash between empires. It's also a story of internal power struggles and shifting alliances.
Exactly. And their story is a perfect example of how personal ambitions can sometimes intersect with larger historical events in surprising ways. Pengiran Seri Leila, the elder of the two brothers, had a bone to pick with the Sultan.
So this wasn't just about religion or territory. It was also a family feud. What was the source of this rivalry between the brothers?
Well, Pengiran Seri Leila believed he was the rightful heir to the throne.
Mm-hmm.
He felt that his brother, the Sultan, had usurped his position, and he was willing to do whatever it took to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his.
So he saw an opportunity in Spain's arrival. Did he approach the Spanish, or did they seek him out?
It seems that Pengiran Seri Leila made the first move.
Okay.
He saw the Spanish as potential allies in his quest to overthrow the Sultan. He went so far as to offer Brunei as a tributary to Spain in exchange for their help in reclaiming the throne.
That's a pretty bold move.
Yeah.
Was he naive, desperate, or just incredibly cunning? What do you make of his decision to side with the Spanish?
It's hard to say for sure what was going through his mind.
Yeah.
Perhaps he underestimated the Spanish, thinking he could control them once he was in power, or maybe he was so consumed by his desire for revenge that he was willing to risk everything.
And what about the Spanish? Were they hesitant to get involved in this internal Bruneian conflict, or did they see it as an opportunity?
The Spanish, always eager to exploit any advantage, saw Pengiran Seri Leila's offer as a golden opportunity. They recognized that a divided Brunei would be much easier to conquer, so they agreed to the alliance, seeing it as a way to weaken Brunei from within.
So it's a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? But these alliances can be pretty fragile, especially when they're built on such shaky foundations. I'm already sensing some potential for backstabbing and betrayal down the line.
You're definitely picking up on some important themes here. These alliances were often born out of necessity rather than genuine trust. And as the Castilian War unfolds, you'll see how these shifting loyalties and personal ambitions play a crucial role in shaping the outcome of the conflict.
Okay, so we've got Spain and Pengiran-Seri-Leyla forming this unlikely alliance, both hoping to capitalize on the situation for their own gain.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg. Things are about to get a lot more complicated, aren't they?
Oh, you have no idea. The Castilian War is about to erupt, and it's going to be a conflict filled with surprises, betrayals, and unforeseen consequences. But before we get to the actual fighting, let's take a quick break.
All right, listeners, we're going to take a quick pause here, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll be diving into the battlefields of the Castilian War. Things are about to get epic. All right, we're back and ready to dive into the heart of the Castilian War. So we've got this fragile alliance between Spain and Pengiran-Seri-Leyla, both with their eyes on the prize.
Right.
Taking on Brunei, a powerful sultanate, is no walk in the park. How did this conflict actually erupt? Did Spain just sail in and attack Brunei head-on?
Well, that's where the story takes another interesting turn. Remember, Spain was all about strategic maneuvering.
Yeah.
They weren't just about brute force. They knew how to exploit weaknesses and use cunning tactics to achieve their objectives. They weren't going to just charge in blindly. They had a plan.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What was their strategy?
Pengiran-Seri-Leyla, remember, had promised the Spanish Brunei as a tributary state in exchange for their help in seizing the throne.
Right.
So the Spanish, seeing an opportunity to strike a decisive blow, decided to launch a surprise attack on Brunei's capital, Kota Batu. They knew that capturing the capital would be a huge symbolic victory and could potentially cripple Brunei's ability to resist.
A surprise attack, huh? Bold move. Tell me more about this daring operation. How did they pull it off?
In 1578, a Spanish fleet led by de Sande himself set sail for Brunei.
Okay.
They had about 400 Spaniards, 1,500 Filipinos, and interestingly enough, around 300 Bruneians loyal to Pengiran-Seri-Leyla. Imagine the scene, this diverse force sailing towards Kota Batu, each group with their own motivations, their own hopes and fears.
It's a reminder that history is made up of real people with real lives and complex motivations. I wonder what it must have been like for those Filipino warriors fighting alongside the Spanish.
Yeah.
Were they true believers in the cause, or were they simply caught in the crossfire of these larger forces?
That's a question worth pondering. We can only speculate about their individual stories, but it highlights the human cost of war, how it can upend lives and force people to make difficult choices.
So this motley crew arrives at Kota Batu. What happens next? Was the element of surprise enough to give them an early advantage?
The Spanish launched their attack on April 16th, 1578, and initially their plan worked like a charm. The Sultan and his forces were caught off guard and forced to flee the capital.
Wow.
The Spanish, with their superior weaponry and tactics, quickly gained control of Kota Batu.
So it's a victory for Spain and Pengiran-Seri-Leyla. It sounds like they achieved their objective.
Yes, but remember, victory often comes at a cost. And in this case, the cost was high.
What do you mean, casualties? Resistance from the Bruneians.
All of that, but there was another more insidious enemy that the Spanish had to contend with. Disease.
Yes, the cholera or dysentery. In those days, with limited medical knowledge, an outbreak like that could be devastating.
Absolutely. These diseases ripped through the Spanish ranks, weakening their forces considerably. Remember, they were in a foreign land far from their supply lines and facing an enemy that knew the terrain.
So even though they had captured the capital, their position was far from secure. How long were they able to hold Kota Batu?
They managed to hold it for 72 days, a testament to their resilience and determination.
Yeah.
But in the end, the combination of disease, dwindling supplies, and the threat of a Bruneian counterattack forced them to make a difficult decision.
They had to retreat.
Exactly. They realized that holding Kota Batu was no longer sustainable. They had achieved their initial objective of capturing the capital and weakening Brunei, but they couldn't risk staying any longer. Before they left, however, they decided to leave their mark.
What do you mean?
They burned the Great Mosque of Brunei.
Wow. That's a powerful statement. I can only imagine the symbolic significance of that act.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about military strategy. It was about sending a message. What do you think they were trying to achieve by burning the mosque? Was it simply an act of destruction, or was there something more to it?
It was a deliberate act of symbolic warfare. They were striking at the heart of Brunei's Islamic identity, aiming to demoralize the population and undermine their resistance. It was a brutal tactic, and one that would have long-lasting repercussions.
So the Spanish retreat from Kota Batu, but not before leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. What's the immediate aftermath of the war? Who comes out on top? Is it a clear-cut victory for either side?
Well, it's not as simple as that. You see, history rarely offers neat conclusions. While the Spanish did retreat, it doesn't mean Brunei was victorious. In fact, Spain successfully prevented them from reestablishing a foothold in Luzon, which was one of their key objectives all along.
So in a way, both sides achieved some of their goals.
That's one way to look at it. The Spanish managed to weaken Brunei's influence in the Philippines, while Brunei managed to defend its homeland from a full-blown conquest. But the conflict had a lasting impact on both sides, and the ripples of this event would be felt for centuries to come.
Okay, so things aren't as black and white as they might seem at first glance. What about the long-term consequences? How did the Castilian War shape the destiny of both Brunei and Spain?
For Brunei, the war marked the beginning of their decline as a major maritime power. It forced them to adopt a more cautious approach to foreign powers and focus on consolidating their control over Borneo. Their once vast empire, which had stretched across much of Southeast Asia, would gradually shrink in the following centuries.
So even though they successfully repelled the Spanish invasion, the war had a lasting impact on their regional influence.
It did.
What factors contributed to this decline? Was it solely due to the Spanish, or were there other forces at play?
The Spanish were definitely a major factor, but there were other contributing factors as well. The rise of other European powers like the Dutch and the British also played a role in eroding Brunei's dominance.
Okay.
These new players were eager to carve out their own spheres of influence in the region, and they were often willing to use force to achieve their goals. Brunei, already weakened by the Castilian War, was increasingly unable to compete with these well-armed and ambitious newcomers.
It's like a domino effect, right?
Yeah.
One event triggers a chain reaction that leads to unforeseen consequences. And what about Spain? How did this conflict shape their trajectory in Southeast Asia?
For Spain, the Castilian War was just the beginning of their long and bloody involvement in the Philippines. It marked the start of what would become known as the Spanish-Moro Wars, a series of protracted conflicts between the Spanish and various Muslim groups in the southern Philippines that would continue for centuries.
So the seeds of a much larger conflict were sown during the Castilian War.
Right.
It's amazing how these seemingly isolated events can have such far-reaching consequences.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about Pendragon Seri-Lela and his role in all of this.
Yeah.
He sided with the Spanish, hoping to seize the throne for himself. Did he get his happy ending?
Unfortunately, Pendragon Seri-Lela's story doesn't have a Hollywood ending. He died shortly after the Spanish retreated from Cotabato.
Oh, what happened? Did he die from the same diseases that plagued the Spanish troops?
That's one possibility, but there were also rumors that he was poisoned by the Sultan, his own brother. Imagine the intrigue, the suspicion, the whispers in the palace corridors. It's a reminder that even in victory, there can be betrayal and unexpected consequences.
So the Castilian War ends, but the story doesn't end there. There's still so much to unpack, so many different perspectives to explore. And I'm particularly interested in the conflicting narratives that have emerged from this conflict. You mentioned earlier that the Bruneian version of events is quite different from the Spanish one. What can you tell me about how these different groups remember and interpret this war?
That's a great point. You see, history is often told from multiple perspectives, and the Castilian War is no exception.
Right.
In Brunei, the war is often remembered as a heroic victory against foreign invaders.
Yeah.
They celebrate the Sultan's defiance of Spanish demands and the ultimate expulsion of the invaders. It's a story of national unity, resilience, and the triumph of good over evil.
It makes sense that they would frame it as a victory. After all, they did manage to defend their homeland from a foreign power. But their narrative seems to downplay the Spanish successes, doesn't it?
It does, and it also tends to gloss over the role of Pendragon Seri-Lela and his alliance with the Spanish. Remember, in Brunei, he's often seen as a traitor who collaborated with the enemy. It's a sensitive topic, one that touches on issues of loyalty, betrayal, and national identity.
It's fascinating how the same event can be interpreted so differently depending on who's telling the story. What about the Spanish perspective? How do they remember the Castilian War?
The Spanish, as you might expect, focus on their initial victory at Cotabato and their efforts to spread Christianity. They highlight the strategic importance of the Philippines and their determination to secure a foothold in this valuable region. They also emphasize the role of Pendragon Seri-Lela and his Bruneian followers, portraying them as key allies who help them achieve their objectives.
So for them, it's a story of expanding their empire and spreading their faith, even in the face of setbacks.
Exactly. They frame the war as part of their larger mission to Christianize the world and bring civilization to what they saw as uncivilized lands. Of course, this narrative overlooks the brutality of their actions, the destruction they caused, and the complex motivations of those who fought alongside them.
It's like two sides of the same coin, each reflecting a different aspect of the truth.
Right.
But what about the Filipinos who were caught in the middle of this conflict? Their voices are often missing from these grand narratives. What can you tell me about their experiences and perspectives?
That's a crucial point and one that often gets overlooked. You see, the Castilian War wasn't just a clash between two empires. It was a conflict that deeply impacted the lives of ordinary Filipinos. They were the ones who lived on the land, who felt the brunt of the fighting, who were forced to choose sides in a war that wasn't entirely their own.
So their perspective is essential for understanding the full complexity of the Castilian War. What can you tell us about their experiences? What challenges did they face? How did they navigate this tumultuous period?
Imagine being a Filipino villager living near Cotabato when the Spanish arrived. Your world is suddenly turned upside down. You're caught between these powerful forces, each demanding your loyalty, each threatening your way of life. Some Filipinos chose to side with the Spanish, seeing them as liberators from Bruneian rule. Others remained loyal to the Sultan, defending their homeland from foreign invaders. And still others tried to stay neutral, hoping to avoid the conflict altogether.
It must have been a time of incredible uncertainty and fear.
It was.
What factors influenced their choices? Was it simply a matter of political allegiance, or were there other considerations?
It was a complex mix of factors. Some might have been motivated by religious beliefs, siding with the Spanish in hopes of converting to Christianity. Others might have been swayed by promises of wealth or power, hoping to gain advantage in this new political landscape. Still others might have simply chosen the side they thought would offer the best protection for their families and communities.
It's a reminder that history is not just about kings and conquerors. It's about the lives of ordinary people trying to survive and make sense of the world around them. Their stories, though often overlooked, are essential for understanding the full impact of these historical events. So how do we go about uncovering these hidden perspectives? What sources can we turn to get a glimpse into the lives of these everyday Filipinos?
It's not easy, as their voices are often silenced in the official records, but we can piece together fragments of information from various sources, looking beyond the grand narratives to find those glimpses of human experience. We can examine local histories, oral traditions, and even archaeological evidence to reconstruct their lives and understand their perspectives. We can also look for clues in the Spanish accounts, searching for those fleeting mentions of Filipino actions, beliefs, and motivations. It's like putting together a puzzle, searching for those missing pieces that can help us create a more complete picture of the past.
That's a fascinating approach. It's like being a detective, piecing together clues from the past to uncover those hidden stories. And I think it's incredibly important work because it reminds us that history is not just about dates and battles, but about the lives of real people who lived, loved, suffered, and triumphed in the face of extraordinary challenges.
Absolutely. By exploring these diverse perspectives, we gain a richer and more nuanced understanding of the past. We move beyond the simplistic narratives of heroes and villains to see the humanity in all those who participated in these events.
So we've explored the causes, the key players, the battles, and the aftermath of the Castilian War. We've even delved into the conflicting narratives and the hidden perspectives of those who lived through this tumultuous period. But I feel like there's still one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore.
What's that?
What if the outcome of the Castilian War had been different? What if Spain had succeeded in fully conquering Brunei and installing Pengiran Seri-Lela as their puppet ruler? How might the course of history have changed?
That's a fascinating question, and one that historians have debated for centuries. It's impossible to say for sure what would have happened, but we can speculate based on what we know about the historical context and the forces at play. Let's step into the realm of what if and explore some of the possibilities.
All right, I'm game. Let's rewrite history for a moment and see what might have been. So let's imagine a scenario where the Spanish, bolstered by their alliance with Pengiran Seri-Lela, managed to completely conquer Brunei. What happens next? What does this alternate reality look like?
Well, the most immediate impact would likely be a much more aggressive campaign to Christianize the population. Remember, Spain was deeply committed to spreading their faith, and they saw conversion as a key part of their imperial project.
Right.
With Brunei under their direct control, they would have had a much freer hand to establish missions, build churches, and try to convert the local population.
So we could be looking at a Brunei where Christianity is the dominant religion today instead of Islam. That's a pretty significant shift.
Yeah, it would be a very different Brunei.
What about the political landscape? How would Spanish rule have impacted Brunei's traditional power structures and governance?
It's likely that Brunei would have been integrated into the Spanish colonial system, much like the Philippines. They would have installed a Spanish governor, established a colonial administration, and imposed Spanish laws and customs. Brunei's traditional ruling elite, the Sultan and his court, would have been sidelined, their power and influence significantly diminished.
So we're talking about a complete overhaul of Brunei's political and social order.
Yeah.
And what about the economic implications? Brunei was a major player in the spice trade. How would Spanish control have affected that?
That's another fascinating aspect to consider. Spain would have gained control of Brunei's key trading ports, giving them a strategic advantage in the lucrative spice trade. They would have been able to dictate terms to other European powers and potentially funnel a large portion of the spice trade through their own colonial networks. This could have had a significant impact on the global economy, shifting the balance of power and wealth in favor of Spain.
So in this alternate reality, Spain emerges as the dominant force in Southeast Asia, controlling not just the Philippines, but also Brunei and its valuable resources.
Right.
That's a pretty dramatic shift from what actually happened. What about the other European powers? How do you think they would have reacted to this expansion of Spanish power?
It's likely that they would not have stood idly by. The Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British were all vying for control of the spice trade.
Right.
And they would have seen Spain's dominance as a threat to their own ambitions. We could easily have seen a series of colonial wars erupt as these powers clashed over territory, resources, and influence.
So instead of a relatively peaceful transition of power, we could be looking at a region consumed by conflict as these European powers fight for supremacy. And what about the people of Brunei? How do you think they would have fared under Spanish rule?
It's difficult to say for sure, but based on what we know about Spanish colonialism in other parts of the world, it's likely that they would have faced a number of challenges.
Yeah.
They would have had to adapt to a new language, a new religion, and a new set of laws and customs. Their traditional way of life would have been disrupted, and they would have been subjected to the often harsh realities of colonial rule.
So while Spain might have benefited economically and politically from conquering Brunei, the local population would likely have paid a heavy price.
It's very possible.
It's a reminder that the pursuit of empire often comes at the expense of those who are conquered.
Exactly. The Castilian War, even though it resulted in a Spanish retreat, was a pivotal event that set in motion a series of changes that would profoundly shape the destiny of Southeast Asia. And if Spain had succeeded in fully conquering Brunei, the consequences would have been even more far-reaching.
It's amazing to think about how this one event, this clash between two empires in a remote corner of the world, had the potential to alter the course of history. But even in the reality that unfolded where Spain didn't conquer Brunei, the Castilian War still had a lasting impact.
Absolutely. It marked the beginning of Spain's long and complex involvement in the Philippines, and it contributed to the decline of Brunei as a major maritime power. It also serves as a reminder of the human cost of these conflicts, the countless lives that were disrupted, and the legacies that continue to shape the region today.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the Castilian War, I'm struck by how much there is to learn from these seemingly forgotten chapters of history. It's easy to get caught up in the grand narratives of empires and conquests, but it's those individual stories, those whispers from the past that truly bring history to life.
I couldn't agree more. The Castilian War, with its clash of cultures, its religious fervor, and its intricate web of political alliances and betrayals, offers a glimpse into a world on the brink of transformation. And by delving into these events, by exploring those multiple perspectives, we gain a richer understanding not just of the past, but also of the forces that continue to shape our world today.
So for you listening out there, here's a final thought to ponder. The Castilian War, though seemingly a distant event, offers valuable lessons about the interconnectedness of our world, the complexities of human ambition, and the enduring legacies of conflict. As you go about your day, think about the untold stories, the hidden perspectives, and the choices that individuals made in the face of extraordinary challenges. Their experiences, though often overlooked, are an integral part of our shared human history. And they remind us that the past is never truly past. It continues to shape our present and influence our future in ways we may never fully comprehend.
That's a beautiful sentiment. The Castilian War may be a forgotten footnote in the grand sweep of history, but it's a story worth remembering, a story that can teach us about ourselves, our world, and the enduring power of the human spirit to adapt, to resist, and to create new narratives in the face of adversity.
And with that, we'll bring this deep dive to a close. But the journey doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring, to keep asking questions, and to delve deeper into the fascinating world of history. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past, exploring the intricate history of the War of Castile. If you were fascinated by this story of power, faith, and resistance, don't forget to subscribe to Voices of History for more epic tales that shaped our world. Leave us your comments and share this episode with other history lovers. See you in the next chapter, where we will continue to unearth the secrets of the past.